I'm pregnant, my wife said 2 weeks after returning from a girl's trip, and the strangest part wasn't the announcement. It was the smile that appeared on my face the moment I heard it. Most people would probably expect shock, confusion, maybe even excitement. Instead, I simply looked across the breakfast table, folded my newspaper, and nodded. Vanessa stood by the kitchen island holding a coffee mug with both hands. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows behind her, turning her blonde hair almost silver around the edges. She looked nervous. Not happy. Not glowing. Nervous. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was how carefully she watched my reaction. We had been married for 35 years. Long enough to raise a family. Long enough to pay off a mortgage. Long enough to survive recessions, illnesses, and all the ordinary disappointments life throws at people. Yet in that moment, standing in our kitchen in suburban Connecticut, she looked at me like a stranger waiting for a verdict. "Are you going to say something?" she finally asked. I lifted my coffee cup and took a slow sip. "Congratulations," I said. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Not completely, just enough to tell me she had been holding her breath. Outside, a lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically across the grass. Somewhere down the street, a garbage truck rumbled past. Everything looked normal. Everything sounded normal. And yet I felt as if the entire world had tilted a few degrees off-center. 2 weeks earlier, Vanessa had gone on what she called a girl's getaway. For women. 5 days. A luxury resort in Florida. Endless photos of ocean views, expensive dinners, and matching sunglasses had appeared on social media every day. I barely paid attention at the time. After all, retirement had taught me that peace often comes from giving people space. At 68 years old, I no longer felt the need to monitor every detail of someone else's life. While she traveled, I stayed home. I walked 3 miles every morning. Met old friends for coffee. Worked in my garden. The routine felt comfortable. Predictable. Safe. Then she came back. At first, nothing seemed unusual. She unpacked her bags, told stories about rooftop restaurants and luxury shopping districts, complained about airport delays. Everything sounded exactly the way a vacation story should sound. But little things began to change. She spent more time looking at her phone. She smiled at messages she never shared. She started talking about the future differently, as if she had suddenly become very interested in plans she had ignored for years. I noticed all of it. I simply chose not to comment. Now she stood across from me in our kitchen announcing a pregnancy neither of us should have expected. "You don't seem surprised," she said quietly. I smiled again. Life has a way of surprising us. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were trying to read something hidden beneath my words. Then she looked away first. That told me more than anything else. The conversation drifted to other topics after that. Doctor appointments. Grocery shopping. The weather forecast for the weekend. Ordinary things. Safe things. But my mind remained fixed on one simple fact. A fact so important that it made everything else irrelevant. Vanessa believed she was sharing a life-changing surprise. What she didn't know was that years earlier, I had learned something that made her announcement impossible. And as I watched her carry her coffee cup into the living room, I realized this story had only just begun. After Vanessa left the room, I remained at the kitchen table long after my coffee had gone cold. The house felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Careful quiet. The kind of silence that settles over a place when something important is being hidden beneath ordinary conversations. I could hear the television from the living room. Some morning talk show. Vanessa laughed once at something the host said, and the sound drifted down the hallway. To anyone else, it would have sounded normal. To me, it sounded rehearsed. I stared out the window at the maple tree in our backyard. I had planted it 27 years ago when our daughter graduated from high school. Back then, life felt simple. Work hard. Take care of your family. Keep your promises. Those rules had carried me through most of my life. At 68 years old, I still believed in them. The problem was that not everyone else did. There was something Vanessa did not know. Years ago, after a health concern and several conversations with specialists, I underwent a medical procedure. It was not dramatic. It was not an emergency. It was simply a decision made by two adults who believed they had already finished raising children and were entering a different chapter of life. The procedure was successful. Completely successful. The doctors had explained everything clearly. I remembered the follow-up appointments. The test results. The paperwork. The certainty. That certainty sat quietly in the back of my mind now, impossible to ignore. Which meant one thing. The future Vanessa described over breakfast could not exist the way she claimed. I stood and carried my coffee cup to the sink. Through the window above it, I could see a squirrel darting across the fence line. Ordinary life continued as if nothing had changed. Yet every detail from the past few weeks suddenly looked different. The expensive handbag that appeared after her trip, the late-night text messages, the way she had started locking her phone screen the moment I walked into a room. None of those things had seemed important individually. Together, they formed a picture I could no longer dismiss. Around noon, Vanessa left to meet a friend for lunch. At least that was what she told me. I watched her car disappear down the street before walking into my home office. The room smelled faintly of leather and old books. Family photographs lined the shelves. Vacations, holidays, birthdays, decades of memories preserved inside wooden frames. I studied one picture from 10 years earlier. Vanessa and I standing on a beach in Maine, wind blowing through our hair, arms around each other, looking happy. Maybe we were happy. Maybe we had simply been better at believing things would stay the same. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. For several minutes, I did nothing. Then I typed a name into a search bar. Not Vanessa's. My own doctor's office. I wanted to review records I had not looked at in years. Within minutes, I found exactly what I remembered. Dates, notes, confirmations, facts. Cold, simple facts. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. There it was. Proof that my memory had not betrayed me. Proof that my instincts were correct. A strange calm settled over me. Not anger. Not panic. Clarity. For the first time since Vanessa's announcement, I understood that rushing toward answers would accomplish nothing. People reveal more when they believe they are safe. They reveal even more when they believe they have already succeeded. Later that afternoon, Vanessa returned home carrying shopping bags and wearing the relaxed smile of someone whose worries had faded. She kissed my cheek and asked what I wanted for dinner. I smiled and told her anything was fine. Then I helped carry the bags inside and listened as she chatted about her day. All the while, a single thought remained fixed in my mind. Vanessa believed she was managing a secret. What she did not realize was that I had already begun looking for the truth. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and followed the same routine I had followed for years. I made coffee, read the local news, and sat on the back patio watching the sky brighten over the trees. Vanessa slept later than usual. When she finally appeared in the kitchen around 8 o'clock, she seemed unusually cheerful. She hummed softly while pouring herself orange juice and immediately started talking about future plans. She mentioned home renovations. She talked about converting one of the guest rooms. She even brought up replacing our aging SUV with something larger. Every sentence sounded as though a major decision had already been made. What interested me most was not what she said. It was what she assumed. She assumed I believed everything. She assumed I was excited. Most of all, she assumed I would never ask difficult questions. I smiled and listened. Years of business ownership had taught me something valuable. The person who speaks the most usually reveals the most. The person who stays quiet learns everything. Around lunchtime, Vanessa left again. The moment her car disappeared, I sat down at my computer and opened social media. During her trip, I had barely glanced at her posts. Now I examined them carefully. One photograph showed Vanessa and 3 friends standing beside a hotel pool. Another showed a dinner overlooking the ocean. A third showed a yacht in the background. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed something interesting. The same man appeared in multiple images. Not clearly. Never standing beside Vanessa. Sometimes reflected in a window. Sometimes sitting several tables away. Sometimes visible in the distance near the yacht. Most people would never have noticed him. I did. Years of reviewing construction plans had trained my eyes to spot details others overlooked. I enlarged the photographs one by one. The man appeared too often to be coincidence. His clothing changed. His position changed. Yet he kept showing up. That evening, I decided to test something. During dinner, I casually asked Vanessa about the trip. Not the pregnancy. Not the future. Just the trip itself. Did you spend most of your time at the resort? I asked. She nodded immediately. Pretty much. It was relaxing. I took another bite of salmon. The yacht looked expensive. Her fork paused for less than a second. Most people would have missed it. I did not. Oh, that belonged to someone staying nearby, she replied. We just happened to take a few pictures around the marina. The answer arrived too quickly. Prepared answers often do. Later that night, after she went upstairs, I returned to the kitchen and opened my laptop again. This time, I searched public business records connected to the marina visible in the photos. It took less than 30 minutes to identify several vessels docked there during the week of Vanessa's trip. One name appeared repeatedly in local articles and event coverage. Ethan Grant, 42 years old, technology investor, widely known in the area. Photographs accompanying the articles stopped me cold. The man from the background images was Ethan Grant. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Maybe it meant nothing. Successful people appeared at resorts every day. Coincidences happened. But the calm certainty I had felt since Vanessa's announcement returned stronger than ever. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I quickly closed the browser. Vanessa entered the kitchen wearing a relaxed smile. She asked what I was doing. "Just paying bills," I said. She nodded and kissed my cheek. For a brief moment, she looked relieved. Then she headed back upstairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Only then did I reopen the article and study Ethan Grant's photograph again. Something told me that his name was not going to disappear from my life anytime soon. Over the next several days, I settled into a routine that felt strangely familiar. During my years in business, I had learned that important information rarely arrived all at once. It revealed itself in fragments. A misplaced detail, an unexpected receipt, a conversation that sounded ordinary until viewed from a different angle. The truth usually announced itself quietly long before it arrived completely. Vanessa continued acting as though life was moving toward a joyful new chapter. She spent hours browsing furniture websites. She ordered sample paint colors for the guest room. One afternoon, I found brochures for luxury nursery designs spread across the dining room table. She quickly gathered them when she noticed me looking. "Just gathering ideas," she said with a nervous smile. I nodded. "Looks expensive." She laughed. "Only the best." That answer stayed with me. Only the best. The phrase sounded less like excitement and more like expectation. Meanwhile, I began paying closer attention to things I had ignored before. Credit card statements, bank activity, small changes in spending habits. Nothing dramatic appeared at first. Then one evening, while reviewing our monthly finances, I noticed several charges that seemed unusual. They were not large enough to trigger concern individually. A boutique hotel, a luxury restaurant, a private transportation service, all located near the same Florida marina from Vanessa's trip. What caught my attention was the timing. The charges occurred one day before the vacation officially began. Another appeared 2 days after it supposedly ended. I stared at the screen for several minutes. The timeline no longer matched the story I had been told. The following afternoon, Vanessa attended what she described as a prenatal consultation. As soon as she left, I drove to the public library downtown. Not because I needed books. I needed privacy. Using a public computer felt safer than conducting certain searches at home. Within an hour, I uncovered something interesting. Ethan Grant had hosted a private investment retreat at a waterfront property during the exact week of Vanessa's trip. Several local business publications had covered the event. One article included photographs from a welcome reception. Most attendees wore formal clothing. Wealthy investors, entrepreneurs, industry executives. And standing near the edge of one photograph was Brooke Sterling, Vanessa's closest friend. My pulse remained steady. Brooke had supposedly spent the week relaxing with friends at a resort. Instead, she appeared at a private event connected to Ethan Grant. I printed the article and folded it carefully into my briefcase. That evening, Vanessa seemed unusually cheerful. She prepared dinner and opened a bottle of sparkling water to celebrate what she called new beginnings. While we ate, she mentioned Brooke several times. How supportive she had been. How excited she was about the future. The more Vanessa talked, the more I listened. People often reveal their priorities without realizing it. Brooke's name surfaced too frequently to ignore. Later that night, after Vanessa went upstairs, I spread the printed article across my desk beside the photographs from social media. Piece by piece, the puzzle was beginning to form. The same location, the same people, the same week. Too many connections existed for coincidence. Yet one question still troubled me. If Vanessa believed her secret was secure, why did she seem increasingly anxious every day? I looked again at Ethan Grant's smiling photograph. Then I looked at Brooke standing only a few feet away. For the first time, I realized I might not be uncovering a simple affair. I might be uncovering a carefully coordinated lie involving more people than I had originally imagined. The following week brought an unexpected opportunity. It arrived through something as ordinary as a phone call. I was trimming hedges in the front yard when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I ignored calls from numbers I did not recognize. That day, I answered. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Linda Harper. At first, the name meant nothing to me. Then she explained that she worked as an event coordinator for several luxury properties in Florida. My attention sharpened immediately. She apologized for calling and explained that she had been trying to reach Vanessa regarding an invoice that remained unresolved. I listened carefully without revealing much. Linda seemed embarrassed. She believed she was speaking to a household that already knew about the event. According to her records, Vanessa had participated in a private gathering connected to Ethan Grant's investment retreat. The moment I heard those words, every suspicion I had been carrying grew heavier. I thanked her politely and told her there must have been some confusion. Before ending the call, I asked a simple question. Was the event held at the resort? There was a brief silence. No, she replied. It was hosted at Mr. Grant's waterfront estate. After we hung up, I remained standing beside the hedge trimmer for several minutes. Cars passed by. Neighbors walked their dogs. The world looked exactly the same. Yet another piece of the puzzle had quietly fallen into place. That evening, Vanessa seemed distracted. She checked her phone repeatedly during dinner. Twice, she stepped into another room to answer calls. Each time she returned with a smile that felt slightly forced. I did not ask questions. Instead, I talked about ordinary things. The weather, a baseball game, a local charity event. The more normal I behaved, the more comfortable she appeared. Comfort encourages mistakes. A few days later, another one arrived. While Vanessa was taking a shower, a notification briefly appeared on a tablet she occasionally used at home. I had no intention of searching through her private messages. I did not need to. The notification itself revealed enough. It was from Brooke. The message preview was short. Only 7 words. Has Daniel signed anything yet? I stared at the screen. Signed anything. The phrase echoed inside my mind long after the notification disappeared. That night, I could not sleep. Not because I was angry, because I was thinking. For 35 years, Vanessa and I had built a life together. We had accumulated investments, retirement accounts, real estate holdings, and savings. Suddenly, I found myself wondering whether the future conversations she kept initiating about renovations and family planning had less to do with happiness and more to do with financial positioning. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with Margaret Hale, the attorney who had handled several business matters for me over the years. Margaret was known for 2 qualities, discretion and patience. I trusted both. When I arrived at her office, she listened without interruption as I described the situation. I did not make accusations. I presented facts, the medical history, the timeline, the inconsistencies, the growing number of connections surrounding Ethan Grant and Brooke Sterling. Margaret folded her hands and looked at me carefully. You have been remarkably calm through all of this, she said. I glanced toward the window overlooking Main Street. Getting emotional would not change the facts. She nodded slowly. Then she said something I would think about for days afterward. Daniel, people who believe they control the story often become careless near the end. As I drove home that afternoon, those words stayed with me. Careless near the end. For the first time, I felt certain that whatever Vanessa was hiding had not yet fully revealed itself. And somewhere ahead, another mistake was waiting. Margaret's words proved correct sooner than I expected. 3 days after our meeting, Vanessa announced that she wanted to host a family gathering. She framed it as a celebration, a chance to share happy news with relatives and close friends. On the surface, it sounded perfectly reasonable. In fact, it sounded so reasonable that I immediately became suspicious. For weeks, she had been unusually protective of information. Now suddenly she wanted an audience. People do not move from secrecy to publicity without a reason. The question was simple. What had changed? As preparations began, I noticed another shift. Brooke started appearing more frequently. Sometimes she stopped by the house for coffee. Other times she called Vanessa several times a day. During one visit, I watched them through the kitchen window while I worked in the backyard. Their conversation looked serious. At one point, Brooke handed Vanessa a folder. Vanessa glanced toward the house before quickly placing it inside her tote bag. The gesture lasted only a second, but it was enough. That evening I casually mentioned Brooke's visit. Vanessa smiled. She is just helping me organize things. A party requires paperwork now. I asked lightly. Her smile flickered for a fraction of a second. Then it returned. You know Brooke. She likes planning everything. I nodded and changed the subject. Inside, however, my certainty continued growing. A week later, another unexpected piece arrived. Margaret called and asked me to stop by her office. When I arrived, she handed me several public records she had located through legal databases. None of them were illegal. None were hidden. Yet together they painted a revealing picture. Ethan Grant had recently established a new trust. Several names connected to his investment retreat appeared in related filings. One of those names was Brooke Sterling, not as an investor, as an administrator. I stared at the documents. Brooke was far more involved with Ethan's world than she had ever admitted. Margaret folded her hands. This may be nothing, she said carefully, or it may explain why certain people seem unusually coordinated. Coordinated. The word fit perfectly. Everything suddenly felt coordinated. The trip, the explanations, the carefully managed conversations, the increasing focus on future financial plans. On the drive home, I found myself thinking less about betrayal and more about strategy. Someone had created a plan. Someone expected that plan to succeed. The only uncertainty was how many people understood the entire picture. That answer arrived 2 nights later. Vanessa had fallen asleep on the couch while watching television. Her phone rested beside her. I had no intention of touching it. Then a message appeared on the lock screen. Only a preview. Only a few words. Yet those words changed everything. He still does not suspect anything. There was no sender name visible. Only the message. I looked away immediately. I did not need to read more. I already knew enough. The assumption hidden inside that sentence interested me more than the sentence itself. They believed I suspected nothing. They believed I remained exactly where they wanted me. Trusting. Passive. Predictable. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. Not because the situation was improving. Because the illusion was working. Vanessa stirred slightly and opened her eyes. She smiled when she saw me. What are you thinking about? She asked. I smiled back. Just the future. She seemed pleased by that answer. But as I helped her upstairs and listened to her discuss plans for the coming months, I realized the future she imagined and the future that was actually coming were becoming two very different things. The family gathering quickly grew into something larger than a simple celebration. Vanessa seemed determined to make it memorable. Invitations were sent. Decorations were ordered. A caterer was hired. Friends and relatives from several states confirmed they would attend. Every day brought a new detail, a new expense, a new conversation about the future. I played my role perfectly. I complimented the menu choices. I helped arrange tables. I even offered suggestions about the guest list. The more supportive I appeared, the more relaxed Vanessa became. It was remarkable how quickly people lower their guard when they believe they are winning. A few days before the event, I met Margaret again. This meeting felt different. By now, the scattered pieces of information had formed a clear picture. Not every question had been answered, but enough facts existed to establish a pattern. Margaret reviewed several updated documents while I sat across from her desk. Outside her office window, pedestrians moved along Main Street carrying shopping bags and coffee cups. Ordinary lives continued uninterrupted. Mine felt suspended between two versions of reality. The one everyone believed, and the one I knew was coming. Are you certain you want to proceed this way? Margaret asked. I considered the question carefully. I do not want revenge, I replied. I want clarity. She nodded. Then clarity is exactly what you should pursue. Before leaving, I signed several papers related to my estate and financial holdings. Not dramatic changes. Thoughtful changes. Precautions. The kind people make when they finally stop assuming tomorrow will resemble yesterday. When I returned home, I found Vanessa and Brooke sitting on the patio reviewing decoration samples. They looked up as I approached. For a brief second, neither woman spoke. Then smiles appeared. Too quickly. Too perfectly. Brooke gathered her papers and announced she needed to leave. After she drove away, Vanessa seemed unusually affectionate. She made my favorite dinner. She asked questions about retirement plans. She even suggested taking a vacation together after the celebration. I listened carefully. The conversation sounded less like a wife sharing dreams and more like someone maintaining a carefully constructed image. Yet I never challenged her. There was no reason to. The truth did not require my help anymore. It was already moving toward the surface on its own. 2 evenings later, another surprise arrived. Ethan Grant's name appeared in conversation for the first time. Not from Vanessa. From Brooke. She accidentally mentioned him while discussing a charity fundraiser she claimed to have attended. The moment she realized what she had said, the room became silent. Vanessa quickly changed the subject. Brooke laughed nervously. I pretended not to notice. Inside, however, I recognized the significance immediately. For weeks, both women had carefully avoided that name. One careless moment had broken the pattern. Margaret had been right. People become careless near the end. The night before the gathering, I walked through the house alone after everyone had gone to bed. Decorations filled the dining room. Gift bags sat stacked near the fireplace. Fresh flowers lined the kitchen counters. Everything looked ready for a joyful occasion. I paused beside a family photograph taken 15 years earlier. Vanessa stood beside me in the picture, smiling beneath a bright summer sky. For a moment, I felt genuine sadness. Not for the marriage I thought I had. For the marriage I once believed we were building together. Then the feeling passed. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs. Tomorrow would bring answers. Maybe not all of them, but enough. And as I closed the bedroom door behind me, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting for the truth. I was preparing for its arrival. The morning of the gathering arrived bright and clear. By noon, the house was filled with voices, laughter, and the sound of people congratulating Vanessa on what they believed was wonderful news. Cars lined both sides of the street. Relatives moved between the patio and dining room carrying plates of food. Friends admired the decorations. Everything looked exactly the way Vanessa had planned. She seemed radiant as she greeted guests near the front entrance. Brooke remained close by her side, helping coordinate every detail. Watching them together, I was reminded of two performers confidently walking onto a stage, completely unaware that the script had already changed. Throughout the afternoon, people approached me with handshakes and congratulations. I thanked them politely. I smiled for photographs. I listened to stories about family, grandchildren, and future plans. No one suspected anything unusual. That was exactly what I wanted. Around 3 o'clock, Vanessa tapped a glass and asked everyone to gather in the living room. Chairs filled quickly. Others stood along the walls. The atmosphere felt warm and celebratory. Vanessa thanked everyone for coming and spoke about friendship, family, and new beginnings. Several guests wiped away emotional tears. Brooke stood nearby smiling proudly. Then Vanessa invited me to say a few words. The room erupted in applause. I stood slowly and adjusted my jacket. For a moment, I simply looked around the room. Familiar faces stared back at me. People who had known us for decades. People who believed they were witnessing the start of a joyful chapter. Thank you all for being here, I began. The room became quiet. Over the past several weeks, I have spent a great deal of time thinking about family, trust, and honesty. Vanessa's smile remained fixed, but I noticed her eyes narrow slightly. I have also spent time reviewing certain facts. The word facts changed the atmosphere immediately. It was subtle, barely noticeable, yet I felt it. Conversations stopped completely. Brooke shifted in her chair. Vanessa glanced toward her for less than a second. Then I continued. I spoke calmly. No accusations. No raised voice. I described the timeline surrounding the Florida trip. The photographs. The inconsistencies. The events connected to Ethan Grant's retreat. Several guests exchanged confused looks. Others stared silently. Vanessa's expression slowly changed from confidence to concern. Brooke looked down at her hands. Then I placed a folder on the coffee table. Inside were copies of public records, photographs, invoices, and documents. Nothing dramatic. Nothing sensational. Just facts. One by one. Clear. Organized. Impossible to dismiss. The room remained silent as people examined the information. Nobody argued. Nobody interrupted. The evidence spoke for itself. Vanessa finally stood. "Daniel, what is this?" she asked softly. Her voice sounded nothing like the confident tone she had used all afternoon. I met her eyes. "The truth," I replied. For the first time since her announcement weeks earlier, she appeared genuinely frightened. Not because I was angry, because she realized I knew far more than she had imagined. Brooke attempted to speak, but stopped midway through her sentence. Several guests quietly stepped back. The celebration had vanished. In its place stood something far more powerful. Reality. As I looked around the room, I realized no dramatic confrontation was necessary. No speeches. No arguments. The illusion had already collapsed. All that remained was one final piece of information. And judging by the expressions around me, everyone understood that it was coming. The silence in the living room seemed to stretch forever. No one reached for food. No one spoke above a whisper. The celebration that had filled the house only an hour earlier had completely disappeared. Vanessa remained, standing near the center of the room, staring at the folder on the coffee table as though looking at it long enough might somehow change what it contained. Brooke avoided eye contact with everyone. Several relatives quietly moved toward the back of the room, uncertain whether they should stay or leave. I remained calm. There was no satisfaction in what was happening, only certainty. After weeks of questions, assumptions, and half-truths, certainty finally occupied the room. I reached into my jacket pocket and removed a single envelope. It was smaller than the folder and far less dramatic, yet it contained the one fact that mattered most. I placed it beside the documents and looked at Vanessa. "The first morning you shared your news," I said quietly, "you asked why I did not seem surprised." Her expression tightened. She already knew the answer was coming. Years ago, I underwent a medical procedure after consulting with specialists. The records were confirmed. The results were confirmed. I reviewed them again recently. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. That is why I knew something was wrong from the very beginning. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. The room remained silent. For weeks, she had been living inside a story that depended on me believing something impossible. Now everyone understood why that story had failed. One of my cousins slowly sat down. Another relative looked toward Brooke with visible disappointment. The reactions were not explosive. They were something much more powerful. They were quiet. Quiet disappointment has a way of revealing truths that anger often hides. Vanessa finally spoke. "Daniel, I never wanted this to happen like this." I nodded. Neither did I. That was the truth. I had never wanted any of it. Not the secrets. Not the investigations. Not the conversations with attorneys. Most of all, not the realization that someone I had trusted for 35 years had been living a separate reality while sharing my home. Margaret entered the room a few moments later. I had asked her to attend as a witness, nothing more. She carried a small portfolio containing finalized legal documents. Again, there was no drama, no threats, no raised voices, just preparation. The same preparation that responsible people use when important decisions must be made. Vanessa looked from Margaret to me and finally understood how long I had been planning for this moment. The illusion that I had remained unaware vanished completely. One by one, guests began leaving. Some offered quiet words of support. Others simply nodded before heading toward the door. Brooke left without saying goodbye. By early evening, only a handful of people remained. The house felt strangely peaceful. As the sun lowered beyond the backyard trees, I walked onto the patio alone. The air felt cool and clean. For the first time in weeks, my mind was quiet. I was not standing there because I had won something. Life is rarely that simple. Trust lost is not a victory. A marriage ending is not a victory. But clarity is valuable. Truth is valuable. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to stop pretending. Behind me, the house grew quieter with each passing minute. Ahead of me, an uncertain future waited. Yet as I watched the last sunlight settle across the lawn, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Peace.